Welcome to the iLearn Virtual Campus. Please sign up for a free iLearn membership on our website, check out our 7th annual conference coming next spring 2021, and let us know if you're interested in hosting events or leasing space on our campus by emailing campus@immersivelrn.org.
Refresh it on top right, I think.
Yeah, it's because I am watching the YouTube video on Hova that is running, but inside the Virbela is not running.
So Travis, if the person is not coming, okay, there will be the video. So, but there is one person not coming right now. But yes, then I jump to you. But I don't know. I asking.
All right.
Francisco, what's happening if this guy doesn't face up the number 4 or this guy? Let's see which number it is. Number 3 is not coming till now. We will play its video anyway, or we go on with the next one.
No, we play his video, but as I understand, he is having some issues. Probably we are going to be able to solve. So he's going to be here. If he cannot arrive, we can just. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
No, we can put him at the last one and just to give him more time to stay. Probably.
Yeah, but we have half an hour because each paper is 10 minutes, 5 minutes of discussion. Generally, we solve that properly. So if anything helps, if he has some connection issues or he's not here, we just play the video and ask the audience to send the questions through Hoover so he can answer later. But I believe we're going to solve. Okay?
Okay, we'll do it. Okay, I think we can start, right?
For sure. I'm going to introduce you. Just a second.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. We're here to begin one more session, a technical session of iSmart 2020. I'm really happy to see you here. I will welcome Professor Michele so he can join us and guide this technical session with the authors. So enjoy. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Nice to present this input session. I would like to introduce the first speaker of 5, Eugénie Brazier from Université Paris-Saclay, CNRS, France. And she will speak about AirPods mid-air indirect input for augmented reality. She's a PhD student in the ILDA, which is a joint team between INRIA and Université Paris-Saclay in France. Her research focuses on the use of augmented reality for everyday life. Each speaker will have 10 minutes, then we have 5 minutes for question and answer. So please, let's start. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Eugénie Brazier. I present the AirPads project in which we study mid-air indirect input for augmented reality. This work has been done in collaboration with Olivier Chapuis, Nicolas Ferret, Jeanne Vézien, and Caroline Appert. Let's first look at the current ways of interacting with content displayed in an AR headset. There are typically 2 ways of doing it. The first way consists of controlling a cursor with head position. Head position is used as a way to estimate the location where users look so that users feel that the cursor is aligned with their sight. This control is often referred to as head gaze. When using head gaze, users not only lack precision, but also peripheral objects might leave their field of view. In this video, the field of view is highlighted. All other parts of the interface are out of it. This can be a problem if users need the context for interacting. The second way of interacting with an AR headset relies on direct hand input. Here, users can easily keep the context inside their field of view, but we see appearing a new issue. Keeping arms in an upward position can be quickly tiring. This kind of interaction should remain short to prevent the user from the gorilla arm effect. This means that after a long time interacting, users might feel pain due to the standing arm position. So, what we need to do is designing interactions that are not exhausting for the user and that will not impact the context view. Let's have a look at users' everyday life. How do we usually interact with a computer? Do we touch the screen directly? Most of the time, no. We use mouses or trackpads. These are indirect ways of controlling a cursor on a computer. So, if this works well for desktop workstations, the question is, could it also work for controlling a cursor displayed in an AR headset? This is the question that we answer in our paper. The idea of using mid-air gestures for controlling a cursor has been previously proposed in the Gunslinger project, where users were performing small hand movements to control a cursor displayed on a distant screen. In this Gunslinger project, hand movements are performed close to the user's side. This means that the user can adopt a comfortable position with their arms along their body. But there are much more possible ways of implementing indirect inputs. Conceptually, what is mid-air indirect input? We can see mid-air indirect input as a way of transforming hand movements performed in a virtual plane, the pad here in blue, for example, into cursor movements on screen. The virtual pad can be located close to the user side, as with Gunslinger, but we could consider other positions. We could even think of different orientations for this plane. In our paper, we actually investigate different possible implementations of indirect input. We can describe these implementations along two dimensions. The first dimension is the location of the pad relative to the user's body. For example, here, the pad could be placed on the user's chest, thigh, waist, or wrist. The second dimension is the orientation of the pad. The pad can be oriented, for example, horizontally, vertically rotated along the y-axis. Well, that makes a lot of possibilities. As a first investigation in our paper, we have focused on the implementations that seem the most promising. First, when placed on the user's thigh, a pad can be either horizontal or vertical. When placed on the user's waist, the pad can also be horizontal or vertical. Finally, when placed on the user's wrist, the pad can again be horizontal or vertical. We reached a total of 6 different pads. We ran an experiment to compare all these techniques in order to see which one works best for discrete or continuous interactions. We also include 2 baselines, gaze and direct hand inputs, in order to see how indirect input performs in comparison with direct inputs. To make this possible, we placed an AR headset on the head of the user and placed a lip motion sensor on their body, depending on the technique to test. For example, for testing the waist techniques, the lip motion was placed on the belt worn by users. Here are the 4 hypotheses we want to test in our experiment. First, we think that users will experience more fatigue with direct hand input than with AR pads. Actually, we know that holding arm up in the air is tiring. Using AR pads, users are able to keep their arms in a more comfortable position. Also, visual and motor spaces are not spatially aligned when using an AR pad. We expect this indirection to be more cognitively demanding. This will probably degrade user performances. This is why we assume that users will perform better with direct techniques than with AR pads. then orientation could increase even more the level of indirection between the motor space and the visual space. As this might degrade user performances even more, we hypothesize that vertical AR pads perform better than horizontal ones. Finally, there is a main difference between placing the lead motion sensor on user's wrist or on user's thigh or waist. If the AR pad is located on the user's wrist, their non-dominant hand can help adjusting the plane location and orientation. We expect this possible bimanual interaction at wrist position to perform better than at waist or thigh position. We tested this hypothesis through one experiment divided into two tasks. The first one is a pointing task. It aims at testing the performances of each technique for discrete interactions, such as pressing a button or validate a checkbox, for example. During this task, participants had to point at different targets in the headset screen. Here, we measured the completion time of the task. The second task is a pursuit task that aims at comparing the performances of each technique for continuous interaction, for example, during AR. In this task, participants had to keep a cursor as close to a moving target as possible. Here, we measure the distance between the target and the cursor in visual angle. Let's have a look at the results. What you can see here are the qualitative results of the whole experiment. We observed that participants did experience more fatigue with direct hand inputs than with all the other techniques. But what about quantitative results now? Actually, we noticed that the performances of direct techniques are not higher than the best AR pads techniques, as you can see on this schema. We observed that two AR pads reach performances that are not significantly lower than the gaze technique, having the best mean performances. These two AR pads are wrist vertical and waist vertical. Concerning the direct hand input, the hypothesis is even more false, as some AR pads, such as the two cited previously, could reach better performances. This means that direct techniques did not perform better than indirect techniques. Now, let's look at the impact of the pad orientation. Comparing pads located at the same position, we see that differences of performances between vertical and horizontal orientations are not always significant. But when it is, we observe that vertical orientation is preferred to reach better performances. This validates the hypothesis that vertical orientation performs better than horizontal one. Finally, by comparing the location of the pad, we see that differences in performance between the wrist and the waist location are never significant, either by comparing only vertical orientations or horizontal orientations, contrary to the thigh location that did perform lower in most cases than the two other locations. We can assume that waist and wrist locations are better candidates to place an AR pad. To conclude, we can give an overview of our study's conclusion with the following takeaway messages. First, indirect input can achieve the same performance as direct input while causing less fatigue than direct hand input. Then, an AR pad should be attached to wrist or waist rather than to the thigh. And finally, the AR pad and the screen should have the same orientation. This experiment suggests directions for future work. For example, we noticed that participants would not perform arms movements in a horizontal or vertical plane. A deeper analysis could define in which area, planar or not, users comfortably interact. Also, in our study, participants had no feedback on the AR pad location. Such a feedback could definitely help users understand the positioning of the tracking area. Finally, we focused only on absolute control, and further investigations on relative control could be necessary for larger output area. Thank you for your attention. I hope you enjoyed this presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. The presentation was very interesting. There is any question from the audience? Please raise your hand or write on here, as in the chat. Feel free. Don't be afraid of asking. Let's see, anybody from the public? Okay. So to break the ice, I will start with a question. And my question is related the possibility. Okay, very interesting work, and the outcome are important. And my question is to you is what about the activity the user is doing? So did you try different activities like walking or just sitting or standing and doing other activities while controlling?
Actually, that's a good question. Thank you. We did not try that, but during the whole experiment, actually, the participants were standing in front of the viewport of the headset screen, and that's all. We did not try anything, any other position. But it would be very interesting to test that. But actually, no, we did not test that exactly.
Is I believe that maybe by walking there will be some probably decrease of performance of this task, but for sure we don't use our mouse when working and at the same time. But this is possible. The people will use this interface while working, for example. So I will suggest you to study this option as well.
Yeah, definitely, that would be a good thing to explore. But actually, that's one of the motivation for the work, to be able to maybe not to move and interact at the same time, but at least to have hands free, to be able to interact as we want and in a normal context without just sitting and interacting at the same time.
Okay, thanks. I think there is time for another question, possibly. Be free to consider possibility of a question. No? Okay, I don't see any question. There is one question on the public I've seen. Can please go on? Who is from the public who wants to do a question? I cannot see any question here. Pedro, can you please tell me who is gonna to ask the question? I don't see it from here.
Oh, I can tell you. Xing Yao Yu is asking, is there any video about the live demo?
Sorry, the live demo, what does it mean exactly?
Oh, the question was, is there any video about the live demo?
But I don't really get what is the lab demo you are talking about here.
Hey, I'm here. So, yeah, I mean, you recruit some participant to join this experiment, right? So I want to ask, maybe, I mean, did you record a video when they doing their when they doing this experiments, when they doing the tasks, and how they would interact with your system? I mean,
okay.
I mean, yes. So the pictures in your slides, it's I mean, you want to explain.
I cannot hear you anymore. I don't know if I'm the only one. Can somebody hear me?
Yeah,
Yes, I'm here.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, just to answer your question. Yeah, maybe you're muted. Just to answer your question, unfortunately, we did not record participants during the experiment, but we did take some pictures of participants, as we wanted to know where the lip motion was placed exactly on the body of the participant, because of course, as we just the lip motion on the participant, it would depend on the body and of the participant. So we took some picture of the location of the lip motion, but sorry.
No, there was just call.
Okay, but yeah, we did not record any video, but it would have been interesting. But what we did is recording the position of the hand with the lip motion coordinate system at any time of the experiment. So we have this this data, and we did not do anything else with this, but that's something that we could also explore, yes, to see what they did exactly with the hand as gestures. But one thing that we observed is actually the fact that they did not interact in a plane, and it was most in some, I cannot describe that, but it was not really planar, the interaction of the participants. So we say as future work that we would like to explore this, to have pads that are not really planar, to see if it's more comfortable for the participant.
Okay, I think we should go on, and maybe some question so specific can be done offline. So I will go for this. So I can give our hands an applause to our first presenter, and we can move to the second one, Huaishilu, the final year undergraduate students in the Department of Computing at Yangtong Liverpool University in China. His research interests include virtual reality and novel interaction techniques. He will speak about exploration of hands-free text-entry techniques for virtual reality. So go on. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. I'm Xue Shilu, currently a Year 4 undergraduate student at Jiaotong Liverpool University. Today, I would like to present our paper titled Exploration of Hands-Free Text Entry Techniques for Virtual Reality. My co-authors in this paper are Yifeng, Wenge, Yuzhen, Xiang, and Khaled, and my advisor, Haining. Text entry is essential for all types of interactive systems, including virtual reality. Users, for example, often need to input passwords to log into a system or send text messages to chat with other users in a virtual social environment. Typically, text entry in VR is commonly performed through handheld controllers. However, there are situations where users' hands are occupied and cannot use their hands to hold a controller to perform text entry. In such a case, the viable answer is hands-free text entry techniques. One of the most commonly used hands-free text entry techniques in VR is dual-based. VR users enter text by keeping the pointer hovering on a text letter for a certain period of time to trigger a selection. But the dual-based technique has certain limitations, such as a long dual time may decrease the performance, but a short dual time can cause false positive selections and errors. And a preset dual time always pushes users to select a target key and quickly move to the next one. This process can be stressful, and keeping the pointer static for a while to avoid selecting unintentional keys could further lead to eye and neck fatigue. Speech recognition is another viable solution for hands-free text entry. But obviously, this method is significantly affected by noisy environment and also with privacy situations. So in virtual reality, can we have some new technique that is capable of hands-free, dual-free, without voice input? In this paper, we present two alternative hands-free text entry techniques for VR systems. The first one is iBlink. Blink type is an iBlink-based technique that allow users to select letters in VR by using their eye blinks, as you can see here. The next one is neck type. As users to use their neck forward and backward motion as a selection mechanism. We conducted a user study to evaluate the performance of these two techniques and compare it against dual type. Results for our user study shows that blink type offers the best performance. Several dual-free approaches has been proposed for text entry in non-VR or VR systems. IS and iSwipe are both gesture-based. IS requires users to draw letters on non-hotspots. iSwipe allows users to gaze at the first and last characters of the words by reverse closing or glancing through the vicinity of the middle characters. Besides gesture-based techniques, selection-based techniques are also widely applied to dual-free. IK allows users to type by moving the cursor inside or outside the specific area. Blink Right 2 is an iBlink text entry system. It presents the potential of blinking typing. However, the technique has not been tested with VRHMDs and its performance is low compared to other techniques. Now let me give you more details of our techniques. In Blink Type, users leverage their iBlinks to select letters. Before we employ Blink Type, we conduct a pilot study with 6 participants to explore suitable iBlinks. So we want to have a better understanding on single eye blink and both eye blinks. Participants were tested on selecting targets by blinking with the left eye or right eye or both eyes. The results indicated that both eyes blinking has the best performance with almost 100% accuracy. Therefore, we choose blink with both eyes for our blink type. Next type leverages the head-forward acceleration movements for selection. Next type can be captured by the built-in IM sensor of current HMD. Here, users confirm the character by moving the head forward for about 1 centimeter, which the human neck can do with ease. We utilize dynamic time wrapping algorithm to recognize the input signals because we can find out that the acceleration in z-axis always produce sine-like waves. We can be easily used to recognize users' intention of selecting by comparing the input curves with the template curves. So to evaluate our techniques, we conducted a user study. We compared the blink type and the neck type against dual type. We recruited 36 participants. Between subjects, design was used to evaluate the 3 hands-free techniques. All participants were familiar with the QWERTY keyboard. None of them took part in the pilot study. So participants were required to transcribe phrases in 6 sessions, and each session consists of 8 phrases. The typing performance is measured by word per minute, total error rate, and not corrected error rate. We also provide user experience questionnaire and simulator thickness questionnaire to measure the subjective feedback. The results indicated that blink type offers the best performance, with participants being able to reach mean typing speed of over 13 words per minute. Neck type and the dual type were typed at a rate of around 11 words per minute in the final session. Our results also revealed significant effects of sessions on total error rate and not corrected error rate. It can be seen from the figures that total error rate saw a decrease from the first session to the last session for 3 techniques, and we did not find any significant effect of techniques on total error rate or not corrected error rate. For user experience questionnaire, we find that blink type is easier to learn and use compared to the other 2 techniques. Also, we find that the dependability rating for blink type is significantly higher than neck type. we performed a correlation analysis. It indicated that higher scores on perspicuity and dependability were associated with higher typing speed. There are several future works of our work. First, a long-term user study will be useful to determine how long is required for users to reach peak entry rates. And second, BlinkTap requires an eye tracker, which may not be available in all current VR HMDs. However, eye tracking technology is becoming cheaper, and many VR manufacturers are now integrating eye tracking solutions with their VR or AR HMDs. So as such, eye tracking will likely be a standard feature of these devices. Being immersed in a virtual environment and doing gaze motions could cause ocular motor fatigue to some extent, especially for some users not experienced with HMDs. So it's important to see how fatigue affected the performance in a long-term use. Based on our study results, we can extrapolate the following 3 recommendations for hands-free text entry in VR. First, BlinkTap is preferred text entry technique in VR if eye tracker is available. Second, dual tap and the neck tap can be used for typing if eye tracker is not available. Third, designers should consider using both eye blinks for triggering a selection instead of single eye blink. So thank you for listening to my presentation.
Thank you very much for your interesting talk. I think we have a time for one question from the public. So please, you can stand up and say your question. Don't be afraid, or you can just write on the Quora, Wova, or here in the Virbala platform. I'm just looking around. Okay, nobody. Seems nobody. Well, also this time I have a question, and I have my background of engineer, so the question will be a little bit similar to the previous ones. The usability, for sure, technically, I see an incredible result, but what about the acceptance from the user? The question is about acceptance. Did you, maybe in the presentation is not mentioned, but did you have some studies about acceptance from different type of user, different ages, for example?
Sorry, we didn't do that because our participants are recruited from the university. So I think they have same background with, with around over 20 years old, and they are major in computer science. So yes, it's good questions. We'd like to see how our techniques perform with older people or with kids. But sorry, we didn't do that before.
Okay, thanks. Maybe some other person, we have a time for quick one, or we can go on. So I don't see no questions. So I will ask a round of applause to the speaker. F4 if you wanna, thank you. I will ask to join next speaker, come on the podium, Akar Gupta. He will, I see you there, over there. And come on the stage, please, if you can. And Akar is a research scientist at Facebook Reality Labs, where he conducts ACI research in the area of augmented and virtual reality. This talk will talk about investigating remote tactile feedback for mid-air text entry in virtual reality. So please go on.
Hi everyone, I am Akar Gupta. I'm a research scientist at Facebook Reality Labs Research, and today I'll be presenting Investigating Remote Tactile Feedback for Mid-Air Text Entry in Virtual Reality. This work was done with my amazing Facebook colleagues Majed Samat, Kendrick Kin, and Hervoe Benko in collaboration with Parola Christensen from University of Cambridge. So here's the problem that we're trying to solve. The lack of haptic feedback for 10-finger mid-air text input. Now, if you try to type in mid-air using your typical 10-finger QWERTY keyboard style typing, it's really difficult and disengaging because there is no haptic feedback in air. And if we look at physical keyboards on a very simplistic level, we can break down the haptic feedback that they provide into two components. One is kinesthetic, which is that the keyboard and its keys impose this physical limit for the user's hand and fingers. And the second is tactile, which is that the user gets finger-specific feedback whenever they press a key. Now, we restrict our focus in this paper to the tactile component for now. So we want to provide finger-specific feedback to the user. At the same time, we want an approach that is simple, inexpensive, portable, and is not overly encumbering. And therefore, we focus on purely vibrotactile feedback, which is the most popular and inexpensive method to provide tactile feedback out there. And we focus on remote tactile feedback, which means that the feedback is not co-located on the fingertips, but is at a slightly distant or remote location, which has lower encumbrance, right? So that your fingertips are not encumbered. And so we investigate 4 different remote vibrotactile feedback conditions. On fingers, where the vibration actuators are placed at the base of each finger, and they actuate when the corresponding finger presses a key. The second one is on wrist spatial, where 5 vibration actuators are placed on the wrist, and each vibration actuator location corresponds to a particular finger, right, as you can see in the figure. The third condition is on wrist non-spatial, and here we only have a single vibration actuator on the wrist that corresponds to all the fingers. So there's no spatialization at all. And the last one is the baseline audio visual, where we do not have any tactile feedback at all. Now, for the virtual keyboard, we designed it to be operationally similar to a physical keyboard. And so the input happens in 3 stages. The first is when the user's hand is hovering over the keyboard. The second is when the finger is colliding with the keyboard, but it's not pressing the key all the way. So you see that gray shaded key in the second picture. That means that the finger is colliding with the key, but the user has not pressed it all the way. And so here, the user feels a very subtle vibration that lets them know that they are colliding with the key. And finally, the key press happens when the finger goes all the way down and the character gets typed. And this is when the user receives a strong vibration. So this is how our setup looks like. You can see the finger-mounted actuators on the top right, and the wrist-mounted actuators below that. And then there is the OptiTrack cage and gloves for tracking the hands in a very accurate and low latency manner. So let's see the user in action here. Right, so this is the hover state. This is when the collision with the key happens. And then the press state. So we conducted a user study to compare these 4 feedback conditions, and we did the study with 24 external participants. And the task was to transcribe the phrase that are shown above the keyboard. Now, the study was a within subjects design with 4 blocks, and each block consisted of all 4 feedback conditions. So on the below portion of the screen, you can see how these 4 blocks and then the 4 conditions among them were laid out. And these were randomized and counterbalanced. I won't be going into the details of that, so please refer to the paper for those details. So what did we find? To start off, we did not find any significant differences between the tactile conditions for text input speeds, right? So the text input speeds were not really impacted by the tactile feedback condition. They became lower as the users progressed through the blocks, but there were no differences between tactile conditions. But that's not the whole story, because we found that tactile feedback was contributing to the user's experience in more ways than one, which the speeds do not necessarily reflect. So let's first talk about our qualitative results. We asked our participants to rank the 4 feedback conditions in the order that they preferred them. And as you can see, the participants dominantly preferred the on-fingers tactile feedback, followed by the on-wrist spatial, followed by the on-wrist non-spatial, and finally the no vibrations, the audio-visual condition. So not surprisingly, as the feedback becomes distant and less spatialized, participants prefer it less. Also, keep in mind that the audio-visual portion of the feedback was also present in the tactile condition. So the audio-visual is a true baseline. Now, this is a quote from one of the participants, which sheds some light on why the preferences are this way. On fingers lets me know which key was depressed. It gives me more confidence I hit the intended key. On wrist spatial does the same thing, but it's not as clear. On wrist non-spatial just lets me know I hit something. We also asked participants to score the 4 conditions on a NASA TLX survey, and we'll focus only on these 2 for now, where we saw significant differences. So participants rated the on-finger condition as requiring the least mental demand and the least effort, in contrast to the audiovisual condition which required the most. Now, this is again in line with the preferences. And this particular participant quote says something very interesting. In on fingers, my eyes didn't need to look at the key to know that it was pressed. I felt that my eyes had to move more between the display and my fingers when there were no vibrations. Right? So there's some varying visual gaze behavior that's going on where participants were paying more visual attention to the keyboard as opposed to where the text was being displayed when there was no tactile feedback. So we are getting some physical keyboard style behavior with vibration. Another metric we looked at was the number of collisions. So this shows the number of finger collisions with a key that did not result in a key press. And here we found that on fingers had lower collisions than the rest, but also the on wrist conditions had lower collisions than the baseline, the audio visual. So that shows that tactile feedback reduces the key collisions made by the users. So to recap, we found that even though the speeds were not significantly impacted by the tactile feedback, it did impact the number of collisions, the user effort and mental load, and the user preferences in a positive way. So what does this mean? This means that tactile feedback leads to lower mental load because the user becomes more confident about their actions where there is tactile feedback. But then when there is no tactile feedback, their performance remains the same because users compensate for the lack of tactile feedback with higher visual and cognitive attention. And what this means is that we need to find better ways than just purely subjective questionnaires to quantify the impact of haptic feedback on our tasks that can capture the visual and cognitive loads of the user, because the differences are not always reflected in task performance. And with that, I'll end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Akar. Yes. I'm curious if there is somebody from the public that has any question. Let's see if there is. Question? No. It's a train or a metro. Any question from the audience? I see a question for the public, or it's an old one? Pedro is old one. This one. So maybe I have a question to you. I have a question about details about the hardware. So I'm curious to know which kind of vibrator sensors you use, and if you tried different ones or different power of them.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so we used like standard vibrotactile LRAs, the linear resonant actuators, and we played around with sort of their amplitudes a bit and sort of zeroed in on a particular amplitude. We did not really look at any other actuators other than LRAs. Yeah, I don't know
Okay, so
yeah.
I can also have another curiosity about also the acceptance. If the user on the finger find annoying having those stimuli for a long time frame.
Yeah, so that was interesting. I think a majority of our users found the on-finger feedback to be useful to them and not annoying because it was not on the fingertips, but it was on the base of the fingers. So it was still finger specific, but it was not really interfering sort of in the sense that it was not directly on the fingertips. So we actually did a pilot study where we compared the fingertip condition and the finger base condition for precisely analyzing this annoyance and irritation, and which is why we ended up sort of doing the finger base condition. But there were people who found this to be irritating, and so yeah, I think at some point it's also down to personal preference, for sure.
Okay, thanks. I don't see any other question, and we run out of the time. So we give our hands to this speaker. An interesting talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we can go on with Travis. Travis, come on the podium. I go away, and you can talk on the podium. Travis Glassline is a research associate with the Mixed Reality Lab at Coburg University and Applied Science. His research focuses on the extension of established input devices in VR. His talk will be pen-based interaction with spreadsheet in mobile virtual reality. So please, Travis, can you go on the podium this time?
Hello, everyone. My name is Travis Kessler, working at the Mixed Reality Lab of Coburg University. And today I'll be presenting our work on pen-based interaction with spreadsheets in mobile virtual reality. Spreadsheets are a popular and widely used application type for data manipulation and modeling. But especially in mobile environments where users typically encounter smaller display sizes compared to desktop environments, as well as the lack of traditional keyboard and mouse input, working with spreadsheet data can be cumbersome and inefficient. We propose a set of novel virtual reality-based visualization and input tools, which make use of the expanded display space available in VR, as well as the extra input space available via a spatially tracked pen, in order to improve working with spreadsheet data in mobile environments. There's already a lot of previous work showing the potential for mixed reality for knowledge worker tasks, such as Fiedler et al.'s work on data exploration in VR, Gruber et al.'s conceptualization of the portable virtual office, or Schneider et al.'s work on configurable keyboards in VR. We were also inspired by previous work on pen-based emitter interactions, such as Salavari et al.'s work on the personal interaction panel, or Gebhardt et al.'s work on hierarchical pi menus in VR. In our concept, we assume the user to be working in a limited physical workspace, using a tablet and a stylus pen to work with spreadsheet data. We are also not trying to fundamentally change the nature of spreadsheets, and instead we want to show that embedding them in 3D can improve working with spreadsheet data by exposing a spreadsheet's internal structure, as well as enabling new interaction possibilities. In order to implement those concepts, we rely on two core ideas. First, we would like to use the extra available display space in VR to display additional information, in order to combat the limited display sizes typically encountered in mobile environments. Second, we would like to use a specially tracked pen and the 3D interaction space above and around the tablet to implement new interaction methods, which are not possible with purely two-dimensional touch-based input. And I will present the concrete techniques we implemented in the following. First of all, we use the display space to the left and right of the user to display additional tabs of the spreadsheet that the user is currently working on. The user can either select these tabs via haptics and confirm selection by tapping a bezel area on the top left of the touch screen in order to activate the sheet, or they can also directly interact with neighboring sheets mid-air via mid-air pointing and pen button presses using our specially tracked pen, using the interaction techniques I will describe later. We can extend a single sheet beyond the touch screen area for cases where a spreadsheet doesn't fit inside a single screen. The user can select cells outside of the touchscreen area in order to shift the currently visible section of the spreadsheet on the touchscreen to the corresponding location. We can also tilt the coordinate system of the spreadsheet sideways in order to enable more ergonomic and comfortable viewing of the display area. And we can also show an entirely separate overview in a separate window next to the tablet, where the user can again select the currently visible area of the spreadsheet on the touch surface via mid-air pointing and pen button presses. In order to improve the readability of the spreadsheet overall, we can mask unused by empty cells by darkening them. We can visualize hidden dependencies. For example, when a function depends on multiple nested functions, the user can lift up a cell to show both immediate dependencies as well as higher order dependencies, in order to eventually be able to see all the cells that a function relies on. For simple nested functions, we can also show the intermediate results of nested functions in a stack of layers above the tablet. We implement common actions like inserting charts or functions using a hierarchical pie menu inspired by Tactile's work. The user can reach all menu items in the pie menu by simply tilting the pen upwards slightly, in order to minimize the physical movements that users have to do. Opening a submenu is simply done by hovering the submenu and then moving the pen upwards to activate the submenu layer. And closing the submenu is also similarly done by just moving the pen back downwards. Selecting a menu entry is then done by a pen button press. Users can add charts using the pie menu previously mentioned. They first select a desired range of target cells, which make up the source data for the chart, and then select the menu entry in the pie menu for creating a chart. Finally, we place the chart down in a target location by pointing the pen and using a pen button press. For existing charts, users can also add trend lines to the chart via a mid-air swiping gesture, which is performed above a chart. One of the most fundamental interaction types in spreadsheets is creating or updating functions. In our workflow, a user can first select a standard range of cells using traditional touch input, then select the menu entry in the pie menu for creating a function, and finally place the function down using the pen on a target cell and a pen button press in order to create the function. Adding cells after that is done by dragging special cell handles to a targeted cell or a targeted cell range, and removing cells from a function is done by dragging a cell's cell handle to a garbage bin which is placed next to the tablet. This process also allows us to revert the function creation process by allowing users to first place a function inside a target cell and then add the cells after that. Overall, this type of interaction allows users to skip lengthy text entry interactions. To facilitate cell reuse, we allow users to group multiple cells into cell clusters by first selecting a desired range of cells and then using the pie menu entry for creating a cluster. The clusters are visualized as boxes above the tablet, and selecting the cells corresponding to a cluster is simply done by hovering the cell cluster and then selecting it via a button press, which allows those cells to be used when creating and updating functions. So for our evaluation, we use both a video-based online survey to gather subjective feedback about techniques and also performed an expert user performance study. In the interest of time, I'm going to refer you to our paper for the results from the online survey and instead focus on the expert user performance study, where the research question we wanted to answer was, are our VR techniques faster than tablet and pen interactions for common spreadsheet interactions? So for the performance study, we trained 5 expert users to be proficient in a variety of common spreadsheet interaction tasks, where the tasks were all atomic operations which are part of everyday spreadsheet interactions, such as creating a function, adding cells to a function, removing cells from a function, adding a chart, and so on. We then had 2 independent variables. The first one was the interaction technique, where we compared our VR implementations to regular tablet and pen interactions with the spreadsheet. But we also added a keyboard and touchpad condition to each task as an additional reference point for situations where the user has access to a keyboard when working in mobile environments, such as when working with a notebook. The second independent variable then was the task type, which consisted of creating a function, adding individual cells to a function, adding a range of cells to a function, removing cells from a function, reusing cells when creating a function, adding a chart, and adding individual sheets, cells from another sheet to a function. And in the last case, we supported both the direct inner interaction as well as the gaze and touch technique shown previously when working in VR. For the results, we then analyzed the task completion times using repeated measures ANOVA, using the Shapiro-Wilk test for normality, and we also used the Bonferroni adjusted alpha level with an initial alpha of 0.05. Overall, in the results, it could be seen that our VR implementations were significantly faster than tablet and pen interaction in many of the common tasks executed, such as creating a function, adding multiple cells to a function, or reusing cells when creating a function. So to summarize, we explored the design space between a VR HMD, a tablet, and a spatially checked pen by transplanting 2-dimensional spreadsheets into VR. Indicative results of our studies showed the feasibility of our approach and that our techniques can be efficiently usable. In future work, we would like to expand our evaluation to non-expert users and more complex compound tasks. And we would like to explore our concepts in other contexts, such as in collaborative scenarios, when utilizing the pen in different ways, when utilizing other forms of input entirely, such as keyboards, or when using our techniques in other knowledge work application areas, such as presentation tools. And that concludes this presentation. Thank you very much for listening. I want to mention that you can find the code to our project in the URL listed on the slide.
Okay, thank you, the speaker. And yes, we have time for questions, even a couple of them. So please be free. And I don't know if it's the virtual reality or it's in reality. Normally, from a big audience like this, there are many questions. So I believe people is more shy with an avatar than in reality. But yes, if somebody else can start, I have my always question for the speaker. And honestly, I'm impressed. And because from implementation point of view, I believe it's not easy. So I believe that it's very boring to use a spreadsheet in my life. So I think this could be an improvement to my actual use of a project spreadsheet. So my question is, which kind of technical, which tools you use for connecting with the Excel or other similar, and so there's some technical points, which graphical interface did you use for that?
Yeah, so the spreadsheet we used was Google Sheets, and we just display the web pages in VR using a Unity add-on called Send File from Browser. So the browser is just rendered live in Unity, and yeah, that's how we interact with the spreadsheet.
So it is Unity 3D based. Okay, good. And the tracking of the pen was done by the headset, or you use external tracking?
No, we use an external motion tracking system. In our case, it was OptiTrack, just because it's the most accurate one we have available. That lets us remove the confounding variable of like the tracking system performance from our evaluation.
Yeah, from this point of view, the requirement seems to be very high on precision and accuracy. And did you try it with less expensive setup?
We haven't tried other setups, but I'm sure those methods are applicable. Like we have many track methods for hands now in modern HMDs, and we just use the OptiTrack system to remove that confounding variable. We haven't explored it in our study.
Okay, thanks. And meanwhile, I give a glance to the audience. Nobody has the courage to ask a question. So in this case, I think we can thank with an applause our speaker, and we can go on. The next speaker is possible. You can come here on the podium, next speaker, and Katyushi Masai from Keio University. His research interests include wearable computing, affective computer, and skill learning. So please, you can start. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Masai, and I will talk about face commands, user-defined facial gestures for smart glasses. This is joint work with Kai Sensei, Sakamoto Sensei, Sugiura Sensei, and Sugimoto Sensei. Now let me start by a use cases. Imagine that the user is at home and it is a smart home, so the appliances are connected to the internet. They can be controlled remotely. Now the user is wearing an optical see-through display such as Google Glasses or HoloLens, and this is the user's viewpoint. And now the user stared at the ceiling light for a short moment, and the optical see-through display recognized it. Then some information popped out and indicating the action the user can take for the light. And the user wanted to go to sleep, so they made the eye closing gestures. Then the display recognized the gesture and gave a command to the light, and the light is turned off. And user took off the display and went to sleep. And in the scenario, the user made the eye closing gestures to turn off the light. And our work investigated how to make this scenario realistic by conducting two studies. The first one is the illustration study. How can we design the face-related gestures to perform specific tasks? In this case, control smart home appliances. And we report the analysis and takeaway messages. Second, a feasibility study. How can we recognize face-related gestures using sensing modality that can be potentially integrated into optical see-through display? So let me talk first about the illustration study. And as we see more and more augmented reality applications from research being applied in everyday life, we can assume a large adaptation of optical see-through display in our life. However, there are problems with the existing input methods. And additional devices are limited when hands are full, and the interaction on HMD has a limited area. And mid-air gestures require space and may lead to muscle fatigue. And considering this situation, we believe facial gestures can be an additional or alternative means. Facial muscles can be controlled intentionally and allow hands-free and subtle, silent, and intuitive interaction. We use the term of face-related gestures from now on, which we mean any gestures that involve the movement of facial muscles, eyes, or heads, or the combination of those movements. And we took a user-defined approach for designing face-related gestures. And this approach employs users in the design of gestures. Ensure that our participants are computational effectively caused by using a gesture, such as turning up the volume, and ask them to click the sign that activates this effect. And according to Morris et al., a gesture set designed by this approach is preferred to the one by human-computer interaction researchers. And user-defined design is now a standard method and applied in a wide range of domains, such as mobile tasks, smartwatches, and augmented reality. And a gesture set for HMD interaction is also explored with this approach, mostly for head gestures and hand-to-face inputs. However, there's little research about a whole face-related gestures design, and we want to investigate which face-related gestures are good for a specific task and which part of the face is usable as an input gesture. And what do we need to consider when designing such gestures? So we conducted an illustration study using the online crowdsourcing service, Amazon Mechanical Turk. It aims to include a broader user base. And first, we conducted an exploratory study, and we found it difficult to design user-defined face-related gestures. So we made a design reference to make it easier for the participant to design gestures. And we selected 15-day mobile tasks considering smart home context based on previous studies. We showed a picture or video of each task to constrain the associated image. And all of them were answered by text using Google Form. We had valid proposals from 37 participants, and the proposal gestures are coded into action unit-based group manually by an experimenter. So the result, while the distribution is different depending on the tasks, the participants proposed facial gestures most frequently overall. And positive or high arousal gestures, such as lifting eyebrows, smile, and so on, are included in the static actions such as turning on the TV or the play music. And based on the comments, we summarized the pros and cons of face-related gestures. And the advantages are the accessibility and usability. So face-related gestures can be used by people who can't speak, and they are hands-free, easy, fast, and silent. So they can fit multitasking. On the other hand, some participants were concerned about the misinteraction by natural expressions. And some argued that eye gestures should not be used when visual attention is needed, such as driving. Also, some are concerned about running costs, such as memorability and adaptation. This means that at first, the face-related gestures could be used as additional means to existing technology, such as voice commands. And facial gestures are acceptable to the users, as is the use of head and eye movements. Simple gestures are preferable in daily life than complex gestures. However, this leaves room for misinteraction and potential high false positive recognition. And socially unnatural behavior like yawning should be avoided. And metaphors associated with tasks are essential to consider when designing face-related gestures. And use positive or high arousal gestures as a trigger to calm devices. Eye gestures are good to show the task direction, and lifting eyebrows works as a metaphor for initializing a communication. And the wing can be a metaphor for the shutter release button of the camera. And paired gestures should be used for paired tasks, such as turning on and off the light. So these are the takeaway messages. And we designed the gesture set based on them and scores that calculated from proposal ratio. And this score is a bit different from the normal agreement score to consider a bias for suggesting gestures that are easy to come up, which was more evident in mechanical Turk. Sometimes we added a second option to consider gesture conflicts, coherence in paired tasks, and the two highest scores. So these are the results for making a call by smile, by turning a TV, by lifting eyebrows. So now we designed the face-related gestures, and let's move on to the feasibility study. So many pieces of research demonstrate the technology to recognize head gestures, eye gestures, and facial gestures. And for wearable solution, earphone type and eyewear type are two major form factors, and we focus on eyewear type to consider potential integration for optical see-through display. And various sensors such as optical sensors, EOG, EMG, capacitive sensors are used for the recognition. And we choose the optical sensors as it is a low-cost and contactless sensing. And this allows classifying eye gestures and facial expressions from skin deformation caused by the facial muscle activities. And we designed the hardware and software. And please refer to the paper for the technical details. And the improvements from the previous research of using this device are the first, we added the IMU 9-axis sensor to compensate for head motion noise. And second, our method used the convolutional neural network to detect the time series gestures. We can detect facial gestures and eye gestures at the same time. And also, our method can robustly recognize deliberate gestures as the algorithm considers the time series. So we ran the technical evaluation to show how well technology can recognize face-related gestures. The target gestures are 8 kinds of gestures from the gesture set we designed in the illustration study. We excluded head-related, as many previous studies already showed its feasibility using IMU. We recruited 30 Asian students in Japan and collected the data. For training data, they made 8 kinds of gestures 20 times based on the software instruction. And also we collected non-gesture data while they moved their heads and kept their heads still. And for test data, the participants made 8 kinds of gestures 4 times in random order within 90 seconds. This process was repeated 3 times. And so we have the 160 gestures for training data and 96 gestures for test data. And this is an example from the experiment. The user made the gestures at his own pace, and we superimposed the recognized results afterwards. You can see that the technology can correctly recognize the face-related gestures. And we first investigated the accuracy using the training data only. we did the leave one user out cross validation. So we trained that with the 12 participants data and tested other participant gesture data. And average accuracy was 61.4%, and most of the errors are that the gesture data was recognized as a non-gesture class. Considering that the random chance level was 11%, and the result was not bad, but there are rooms for improvements. And for user-dependent tuning, we showed higher accuracy of F1 score 0.911, and wink was the easiest to recognize, and opening mouth was difficult as it showed a lot of false positives. Note that we did not count the non-gesture class, as there are many data points compared to other gesture classes. And also the experiment did a more realistic scenario where he made a smile and wink twice every 4 minutes while doing some indoor activities. In the meantime, he watched a comedy that induced some natural smiles, and he walked around in the room and corrected the device's position many times. And the result was good, so there are only one false positive of wink by scratching the nose right side, like this, and F1 score of 0.921 for smile and 0.867 for a wink. And it is very important to reduce the false detection of gestures for realistic scenario while keeping the usability of this technology. And we discussed the 5 topics in the paper, such as improve data quality, use sophisticated algorithm, consider independence of gestures, use a trigger command, and combine the different technology. And for limitation and social implication, we described about 3 topics, such as mechanical tap noise and algorithm generalization. And please refer to the paper for more details. And we believe the sociological aspect of performing gestures is especially important. Technology may add the role and usage of facial expressions in human-to-human communication, and we need to consider culture and each user's preference. And this is the summary, and I'd like to end my talk. Thank you for the attention, and I'm happy to take questions.
Sorry, I have the mic closed. So there are some questions this time. The one from Joao Teixeira, probably you are here in the audience. Can you please give, can you talk and ask directly your question?
Yes, great presentation. I was wondering how many gestures are you able to do using this kind of technology? Is there a limit?
Yeah, I think as you said in the text, so if you increase the kinds of gestures, then the accuracy will decrease. But I think it depends more on like the user's execution skill. So if I ask the participants to open the mouth, then sometimes the user also raise the eyebrows. So this could also reduce the accuracy. But I think the technology itself can recognize the relatively 10 to 10 gestures or more.
Great, thank you
for the question.
Thank you. I like to have another question, which is very curious, and from Kristen Widley. Are you here in the public? Can you ask? Yes. Go on.
It wasn't a question on my part, but just a thought that you guys should investigate gender differences in facial gestures, especially kind of willingness to do certain facial gestures.
So I didn't do the formal study to get the some compare the gender difference, but the most of the women participants can relatively good show the good F1 scores, and I think they prefer like smile gestures or opening mouth gestures, which they do usually in daily life. But we ask the agents to do the gestures, so sometimes the raising the eyebrow is a bit difficult for them.
Yes, the question was also about wrinkles. Some studies say that making exercise with the face muscles helps reducing them. So I probably also this is interesting to study as well.
Yes, I think that my study lacks a sociological aspect of such as performing gestures. So I should definitely investigate this kind of directions.
Right. I'm just putting it out there as an open question. I definitely don't know what the answer would be, but I think it'll be kind of mixed into people's willingness to do certain things.
Yeah, thank you for the suggestion.
Okay, great. Maybe there is even 1 minute for one quick question or from the audience, because the theme is very interesting. Also from cultural point of view, there are culture where the facial expression is a part of the culture, and some others where are seen as a very different way. So what's your position about that? Have you studied this from literature, for example?
Sorry, the connection was bad. So could you repeat the question?
Yes, about the cultural. Some cultures like to do that, and some other cannot do facial expression because it's considered bad habits, bad uneducated expressions.
Yeah, so we have only the Japanese students, so we only consider that Japanese culture, the students with the Japanese culture. But I think the cultural aspect also needs to be considered for the further studies.
Okay, guys, I think we're done with the session. I give an applause to the last speakers and to all speakers of today. I think they did a very great scientific work. So I leave you, I want to close the session, and thank you very much for being here. Thanks.
Great, Michael. Thanks a lot for you and for authors. Indeed, it was a great session in NISMR 2020 with its high quality standards papers. So thanks again. We have some announcements with a student volunteer now. Mateus, please. And we will have these announcements and some future activities. And then after them, we are going to come back in the afternoon. Mateus, please give the announcement. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. Glad to have you here. Now we are going to have a social break. We are pleased to announce that you can now go to the Porto de Galinhas beach here on Virbela to enjoy the second part of the cultural event show Cordel do Fogo Encantado, which is a theater troupe from Arco Verde in the rural area of Pernambuco. Cordel do Fogo Encantado is a band strongly influenced by the state culture, which mixes theater performances, poetry, cordel literature, and regional percussion. Band is the pride of
Welcome to the iLearn Virtual Campus. Please sign up for a free iLearn membership on our website, check out our 7th annual conference coming next spring 2021, and let us know if you're interested in hosting events or leasing space on our campus by emailing campus@immersivelrn.org.